Hi everyone. So this presentation focuses specifically on the term, or the concept rather, the sociological imagination. And as I've alluded to previously, this is a really important building block of the entire discipline of sociology. So I pulled up a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on the cover slide of this presentation because I think it's a great idea or question for us to consider as we get into this topic or discussion of the sociological imagination. Dr. King is quoted as saying, "It is a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he should lift himself by his own bootstraps. It is even worse to tell a man to lift himself by his own bootstraps when somebody is standing on the boot." So think about that and take that in, right? This idea of being able to pull yourself up by the bootstraps is really kind of a founding building block of what we refer to as the American dream, which is just this idea that anybody in America, no matter who you are or where you came from what your background is, anybody can accomplish their dreams if they work hard enough. Right? Now, at face value, that sounds like kind of a positive mantra to have, this kind of like little engine that could, I think I can, I know I can, if I work hard enough, I can achieve anything. And while for some people that may be true, from the field of sociology, what our science tells us is that by and large, this statement, the idea of the American dream, that you can pull yourself up by the bootstraps, is false. It scientifically does not hold weight. Now, why might this be? Why might this be? This is something that's really hard for us as Americans to accept because this American dream ideology is something that we are socialized to believe from the time we're very little, that a hard work ethic can accomplish anything. But realistically, that's not always enough for everyone. For some people, a hard work ethic might be enough, but for people, specifically people who are disadvantaged or who experience structural oppression in society, sometimes a hard work ethic isn't going to get you to where you want to be because there's these structural barriers in place. And that's what Dr. King was getting at when he was saying it's cruel to tell people that if you work hard enough and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you can accomplish anything. It's cruel to say that to someone who doesn't even have boots to begin with. And it's even worse to say it to someone who has a foot, someone else standing on top of their boot, right? If you have these barriers in place or you don't come from the same areas of privilege or opportunity as other people, who's to say that those people that have experienced oppression, those people that have experienced marginalization their entire lives, have the same access to succeed as people who have experienced less oppression or less marginalization? So this is a really important entry into this concept of the sociological imagination. So the objectives for this presentation are to identify what it means to approach issues of inequality sociologically, and also to apply this concept of the sociological imagination to social problems. So sociology strives to see the general in the particular. And what do we mean when we say that? Well, we think in sociology that understanding human behavior requires us to be able to place any individualistic human or their behavior in a wider societal context, right? Sociologists were never really that interested in just what one person is doing. We're looking for patterns of human behavior, right? So we're looking for widely shared behaviors, norms, values that exist across groups of individuals in society. So we're looking for how seemingly individualistic choices are really being influenced by these larger societal forces or social structures in our society, right? So a question that a sociologist would always be asking is, how are the experiences of any given individual connected to larger society, right? As an individual, as a US citizen, I have the freedom to make a lot of personal choices for myself, right? I can choose if I want to pursue a college education or not. I can choose what employment I want to pursue, right? So I do get some level of individual autonomy or agency over my decisions, but from a sociological perspective, we're always looking at, okay, yes, as an individual, you can make choices for yourself, but what are the larger forces that probably played a meaningful factor and shaping that individual's choice, For example, for myself, I am a white, male, I am part of the LGBT plus community. I am a first generation college student. I came from a Catholic family. I came from a rural community. Those are all aspects of my identity. A sociologist would be very interested, not specifically in the individual choices I make, but in how all of those different aspects of my identity that I share with thousands of other Americans likely influence my decision making in connection to other people who share those aspects of identity with me, right? So how does gender shape my decision making? How does religion shape my decision making? How does my race shape my decision making? Those are the types of questions that we're interested in looking at in sociology. And that's what it means when we say we're looking for the general and the particular. Yes, we might study individuals. We might look at a group of individuals. For example, I might look at a group of students at TAMU-CC, but I'm not really interested in their individual endeavors as a sociologist. I'm interested in, okay, how does this group of students at TAMU-CC, how do their shared understandings of life, their shared identities affect their individual behaviors, right? Sociology also looks to see the strange in the familiar. Okay, so another way of thinking about this is that sociologists approach the everyday world as if we're seeing it for the first time. I always tell my students that a sociologist's absolute favorite question is why. We ask why about everything. We want to know why people do the things that they do, right? Especially things that look normal to us, right? Why is it normal for a man to wear pants and for a woman to wear a skirt, but it's not normal for a man to wear a skirt in the United States? You know, why is it normal for children to be able to pick their nose in public, but not normal for adults to be able to do it? You know, like, why do these things happen in society? Who decides what's normal and what's not? Who decides who gets access to privileges and who doesn't? Those are questions that sociologists are really interested in. So we're looking for strange things in what are typically familiar, things that we're taught to take for granted. We question why. Nothing goes unquestioned by a sociologist. So if you're a naturally curious person, you're going to love this class and you're going to love sociology because we are very inquisitive creatures. We're constantly asking why, right? So according to C. Wright Mills, this concept of the sociological imagination is the ability to recognize that private troubles are rooted in public issues and structural problems. Now, I asked you to read the opening chapter of Mills' book, where he introduces this concept of the sociological imagination. And it's probably the hardest thing you're going to read in this entire course. So just do your best to get through it. And I'm hoping that you picked out pieces that were at least interesting or piqued your interest, or maybe you wrote down some questions while you were reading it because it was a really difficult piece to get through. But the big takeaway from that article or that chapter that I assigned to you is that understanding that as individuals, the seemingly individualistic choices that we make and the problems that we have as individuals in society are oftentimes connected to larger social structures or even to public issues, or another way we could refer to public issues are social problems. These larger, more pervasive, negative things happening in society that affect large groups of people. So we live in a society that is very quick to blame individuals for their own problems, right? If a person is unemployed, we often just assume, oh, that person is lazy, right? That person must have chose not to finish their schooling to get enough skills to get a job, or they just don't have a good work ethic. You know, that person is just lazy. We blame the individual. That's how we as Americans are kind of socialized, unfortunately, to think about people. But from a sociological perspective, we're never going to immediately blame an individual for a problem they have. We're going to take a step back. I like to think of it as going up in a hot air balloon. We're going to get a broader perspective. We want to understand what are some broader forces, some larger structures that might cause this individual to have that problem, right? So instead of blaming the individual, in sociology, we are always first going to be very critical of the system. We're going to look at the structure of society to understand if there's some larger structural flaw that may be causing this individual to have a problem. So for example, if a person is unemployed, a sociologist wouldn't just assume that person is lazy. A sociologist would ask, what social structures may limit that individual's opportunity to get employed? Why might that person be unemployed, right? So when when Mills is talking about this, he kind of breaks it up into private troubles versus public issues. So some people, individuals every day, we do have private troubles, problems that deal with our immediate surroundings that are solvable within ourselves individually, right? Maybe we encounter some sort of problem or trouble in our life, and it's not really connected to larger social forces. Maybe it's something that we really do have the ability to fix if we work towards it or if we try and accomplish something. So an example of this, let's think of a guy named Billy. Let's say Billy got fired because he chose not to complete his work on time, right? Billy just really didn't want to do his job. He would rather, when he's sitting at work, he would rather go online and screw around on Facebook, whatever, instead of doing what he's actually supposed to do. All right, well, maybe shame on Billy. Maybe that is a private trouble. Billy had the ability to do his job. He was educated and trained to do this work, but he individually chose not to. Okay, so that would be an example of a private trouble. However, private troubles often can be stemming from larger public issues as well. So public issues, or we could also think of these as social problems, are problems that exist beyond the individual, those that are located within the larger structures of society, right? So addressing public issues requires us to take a step back, to go up in that hot air balloon, to get a broader perspective, and to understand the larger social structures that impact our lives in ways that are often beyond our control as individuals, right? This means that sometimes we as individuals can't pull ourselves up by our bootstraps because there's some larger barriers in the way that we as individuals don't have the power or the ability to overcome. So for example, maybe Billy got fired because his company and dozens similar to it in surrounding area got shut down, right? If Billy got fired, is it his fault that he's unemployed? No. In this case, dozens of companies shut down, thousands, hundreds of people probably lost their jobs similar to Billy. At this instance, it becomes a public issue. We have to understand what caused all these companies to shut down. What larger social forces are at play here that cause these hundreds or thousands of people to lose their jobs, right? So it's not always so easy to just blame an individual for their problems. A lot of times, the problems that we experience as social beings in society stem from larger social forces that are beyond our individualistic control. It's important to note that events that seem like personal troubles are often influenced by public issues. For example, Billy may have gotten fired for not completing his work on time, but what if dozens of Billy's coworkers also got fired for that exact same reason? What social structures may influence this pattern, right? So this may seem like a really personal problem that Billy had, right? He was just lazy. He wasn't completing his work on time. But what if we come to find that dozens of people similar to Billy, dozens of his coworkers from the same community, were also getting fired because their employers thought that they weren't completing their work effectively? Well, as a sociologist, we're starting to see a pattern here, right? It's not just one individual getting fired, it's numbers of individuals. So that would ping our curiosity. We would ask, why is this happening, right? Well, maybe after doing some research, we would come to find that Billy and all of his coworkers lived in the same impoverished neighborhood, okay? Now, public schools are actually funded by property taxes that are paid by individuals that live within that school district. So what this ends up meaning is that if you live in a poor neighborhood that has very poor or very low, inexpensive housing, your public schools are actually getting very few tax dollars. So your public schools in that same neighborhood are going to be very poorly funded. Now, research has consistently found that poorly funded schools experience a number of disadvantages in terms of providing quality education. Poorly funded schools have a harder time hiring high-quality educators and often hold less rigorous standards for their students. So as a result, Billy and hundreds of his classmates may have received the same inadequate education. No one in Billy's community may ever have been taught the importance of completing assignments on time. They may never have been had that skill ingrained into them because of the community, the environment that they were raised in. So at this point, maybe we shouldn't just be pointing individual fingers at people that got fired. Maybe we need to point a finger at the system. In this case, it's a pretty clear indication that the public school system in Billy's community is failing. So a sociologist would want to address that particular inequality. So sure, we could hold him accountable as an individual, shame on him, but remember, as sociologists, we are looking for patterns of human behavior. Instead of blaming the individual, we're going to look for the system first and see what problems are happening at the systems level. All right. So we would ask questions like these: what structures are at cause here? How could private issues be connected to public issues? And this is the basis